The mistaken identity Sofia Martinez pressed the elevator button for the 15th floor, her portfolio clutched tightly against her chest. The morning sun streamed through the glass walls of the Meridian Tower, casting geometric shadows across the polished marble lobby. She had exactly 20 minutes to reach Henderson Creative Studios for what could be the most important interview of her life. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing an already occupied car. 3 people in expensive suits glanced up from their phones, their conversation halting momentarily. Sofia stepped inside, focusing on the illuminated buttons. 15th floor. Her destination glowed softly among the array of numbers. "Going up?" asked a woman with silver hair and kind eyes. "Yes, thank you," Sofia replied, smoothing down her navy blazer, a thrift store find that she'd tailored herself to achieve a professional look on her limited budget. The elevator began its ascent, but instead of stopping at the 15th floor, it continued upward. Sofia watched the numbers climb, 16, 17, 18. Her heart began to race as they passed 20, then 25. When the elevator finally stopped at the 32nd floor, she realized with growing panic that she must have accidentally pressed the wrong button in her nervousness. "This is us," announced the silver-haired woman, gesturing for Sofia to follow. "The boardroom is just down the hall." Before Sofia could correct the misunderstanding, she found herself being ushered down a corridor lined with abstract paintings and floor-to-ceiling windows. The view of the city sprawled below was breathtaking, but her anxiety overshadowed any appreciation for the scenery. "I think there's been a mistake," Sofia began, but her words were lost as they entered a spacious conference room where a dozen people sat around an imposing glass table. At the head of the table sat a man who commanded attention without saying a word. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit impeccably tailored, and his steel-grey eyes held an intensity that made Sofia's breath catch in her throat. This was clearly someone important, someone who expected excellence and wouldn't tolerate anything less. Our consultant has arrived," the silver-haired woman announced. "Everyone, this is our brand strategist from Morrison & Associates." Sofia's eyes widened in horror. Morrison & Associates was one of the most prestigious consulting firms in the city. She opened her mouth to correct the mistake, but the intimidating man at the head of the table spoke first. "Miss—" His voice was deep, authoritative, with a slight roughness that suggested he was used to giving orders and having them followed without question. "Martinez," Sofia managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Miss Martinez, I trust you've reviewed our current market position and have insights into our expansion strategy." He leaned back in his leather chair, his penetrating gaze never leaving her face. Sofia felt heat creep up her neck. She could either confess to the mix-up and face the humiliation of being escorted out by security, or she could try to navigate this impossible situation with what little business knowledge she possessed. From her graphic design studies. Taking a deep breath, she made her choice. "I've observed that your brand presence lacks emotional connection with your target demographic," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "Your messaging is technically sound, but it doesn't tell a story that resonates with people's aspirations." The room fell silent. Several executives exchanged glances, and Sofia was certain she had just made a fool of herself. But the man at the head of the table leaned forward slightly, a spark of interest flickering in his eyes. "Continue," he said simply. Sofia, "S-mind raced." Drawing from her experience working with small businesses and her observations of successful brands, she continued, "People don't just buy products. They buy into dreams, values, and identities. Your current campaign speaks to logic, but it ignores the emotional drivers that actually motivate purchasing decisions." She gestured toward the presentation materials scattered on the table, her confidence growing with each word. You're selling features when you should be selling transformation. Instead of telling people what your product does, show them who they could become by using it." The silver-haired woman nodded approvingly, and several other executives began taking notes. But it was the intense man's reaction that mattered most to Sophia. He was studying her with newfound interest, as if she were a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Interesting perspective," he said, his voice carrying a hint of something that might have been approval. "What specific changes would you recommend?" As Sophia began to outline her ideas, drawing from every design principle and marketing concept she'd ever learned, she realized that her accidental entrance into the wrong room might not be the disaster she'd initially thought. For the first time in months, she felt like someone was truly listening to her ideas. She had no idea that the man hanging on her every word was Vincent Blackwood, one of the most powerful CEOs in the country, or that this case of mistaken identity was about to change both of their lives forever. The intrigued billionaire Vincent Blackwood had built his empire on reading people, their motivations, their weaknesses, their potential value to his organization. In 15 years of running Blackwood Industries, he had encountered countless consultants, each more polished and predictable than the last. They spoke in corporate buzzwords, presented recycled strategies, and told him exactly what they thought he wanted to hear. But this woman, Sophia Martinez, was different. As the meeting concluded, and the other executives filed out, discussing implementation timelines and budget allocations, Vincent remained seated, his fingers steepled as he studied Sophia. She was gathering her portfolio with slightly trembling hands, clearly overwhelmed by what had just transpired. "Oh, Miss Martinez," he said, his voice cutting through her nervous movements. "A word?" The last executive closed the door behind them, leaving Vincent and Sophia alone in the vast conference room. The city sprawled below them through the floor-to-ceiling windows, but Vincent's attention was entirely focused on the woman standing uncertainly near the table. "That was quite a presentation," he said, rising from his chair with fluid grace. At 6'2", he towered over her petite frame, but something in her posture told him she wouldn't be easily intimidated. Not entirely, anyway. "Thank you, mister?" Sophia's voice carried a question, and Vincent realized with amusement that she genuinely didn't know who he was. Blackwood. Vincent Blackwood. He watched her face carefully for recognition, for the usual shift in demeanor that accompanied people. Learning his identity. When none came, his intrigue deepened. "I'd like to discuss your ideas further," he continued, moving to stand beside the window. "Perhaps over coffee. There's a cafe on the 20th floor." Sophia glanced at her watch, and Vincent caught the flash of panic in her eyes. "I actually have another appointment. Cancel it." The words came out more sharply than he'd intended. A reflexive command born from years of having his requests treated as orders. He saw Sophia's spine stiffen, her chin lift slightly in defiance. "I'm sorry, but I can't just cancel." "I'll make it worth your while," Vincent interrupted, then paused, recognizing something in her expression that he hadn't seen in years. Someone was about to tell him no. The realization was both foreign and strangely exhilarating. Sophia studied his face for a long moment. Vincent found himself holding his breath, waiting for her response like a teenager asking someone to prom. When was the last time an outcome had been uncertain for him? "One coffee," she said finally, "but I really do have somewhere to be after that." 20 minutes later, they sat across from each other in the executive cafe, Vincent nursing a black coffee while Sophia sipped nervously at a latte. The space was nearly empty. Most employees knew better than to frequent the same cafe as the CEO, giving them privacy to continue their conversation. "Tell me about yourself," Vincent said, leaning back in his chair. "How did you get into brand strategy?" Sophia nearly choked on her coffee. The truth was, she hadn't gotten into brand strategy at all. She was a freelance graphic designer struggling to make ends meet, living in a studio apartment with a leaky faucet and a refrigerator that hummed like a dying car engine. "I started in visual design," she said carefully, which was true enough. "But I realized that good design is meaningless without understanding the story behind it." Vincent nodded, appreciating the insight. "And before Morrison and Associates, I worked with smaller clients," Sophia replied, her palms growing sweaty. "Local businesses, startups. You learn a lot about authentic connection when you're working with people who are passionate about their work, but don't have massive budgets for traditional marketing." This was also true. Sophia had designed logos and websites for a bakery, a yoga studio, and a vintage bookstore. Their owners had taught her more about genuine brand identity than any textbook ever could. "Refreshing," Vincent murmured, and something in his tone made Sophia look up sharply. "Most consultants I work with have never interacted with a business that wasn't already worth millions." They talked for an hour, Vincent asking probing questions about market dynamics and consumer psychology, Sophia drawing from every article she'd read, every small business owner she'd worked with, every observation she'd made about what made people choose one brand over another. She found herself relaxing, even enjoying the intellectual challenge of keeping up with his sharp mind. "I'd like you to work directly with me on this project," Vincent said as they prepared to leave. "My assistant will arrange the details." Sophia's heart plummeted. She couldn't possibly continue this charade. Eventually, someone would contact Morrison and Associates, or check her credentials, or ask for references she couldn't provide. "Mr. Blackwood, I should mention—" "Vincent," he corrected. "And whatever you're about to say, don't. I've made my decision." He stood, buttoning his jacket with practiced efficiency. "I'll have Emma, my assistant, send you the project brief. We'll meet again tomorrow to discuss your initial recommendations." As he walked away, leaving Sophia sitting alone at the small cafe table, she realized she was trapped in a lie that was growing bigger by the minute. But more unsettling than the deception was the strange flutter in her chest whenever Vincent Blackwood looked at her with those intense grey eyes, as if she were the most fascinating person in the room. She had no idea that Vincent was experiencing a similar sensation, the first genuine interest he'd felt in years, sparked by a woman who challenged his assumptions and spoke to him like he was simply a person rather than a title and a bank account. Neither of them suspected that tomorrow would bring complications neither was prepared to handle. The growing connection. Emma Chen had been Vincent Blackwood's assistant for 8 years, and in that time she had developed an almost supernatural ability to read her boss's moods, anticipate his needs, and manage the endless stream of people who wanted a piece of his time and attention. She had never, however, seen him pace his office like a caged wolf while waiting for a consultant to arrive. "Your 10 o'clock is here," Emma announced through the intercom, though she privately wondered who this Sophia Martinez was and why Vincent had specifically requested that Emma personally handle all communications with Morrison and Associates regarding this project. "Send her in," Vincent replied, and Emma noted the slight tension in his voice, unusual for a man who typically approached business meetings with the emotional engagement of someone reading a grocery list. Emma opened the office door and gestured for Sophia to enter. She had been curious about the woman who had captured her boss's professional interest so completely, and her first impression was unexpected. Sophia Martinez was pretty but not stunning, well-dressed but not expensively. And she carried herself with the careful composure of someone trying very hard not to appear nervous. "Miss Martinez." Vincent rose from behind his mahogany desk, and Emma caught the subtle change in his posture, more relaxed, more genuinely engaged than she'd seen him in recent memory. "Thank you, Emma," Vincent said, a clear dismissal. As Emma closed the door behind her. She made a mental note to keep a closer eye on this particular consultant. In 8 years, Vincent had never bothered to learn the first names of the rotating cast of business advisors who cycled through the company. Inside the office, Sophia was struggling to maintain her composure. She had spent the previous evening researching Blackwood Industries online, and the magnitude of her deception was now crystal clear. Vincent Blackwood wasn't just some executive. He was a billionaire whose business empire spanned technology, real estate, and renewable energy. His net worth was estimated at over $3 billion, and he was known for his ruthless business acumen and complete intolerance for incompetence. And here she was, a freelance graphic designer from Queens, pretending to be a high-level consultant, while wearing a suit she'd bought at a consignment shop. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," Vincent said, moving to sit across from her in one of the leather chairs arranged around a small conference table. The informal seating choice surprised Sophia. She had expected to sit across from his imposing desk like a supplicant seeking an audience. "I want to know more about your background," he continued. "Your approach is different from what I'm used to." Sophia's throat felt dry. "Different? How?" "You're not trying to sell me anything," Vincent said, studying her face with those penetrating grey eyes. "Most consultants walk in here with predetermined solutions they're eager to implement regardless of whether they fit our actual needs. You asked questions, you listened to the answers." Heat crept up Sophia's neck. She wasn't trying to sell him anything because she genuinely had nothing to sell except her scattered thoughts and observations. "I believe in understanding a problem before proposing solutions." Exactly. Vincent leaned forward slightly, his intensity focused entirely on her. "I've been running this company for 15 years, and I can count on one hand the number of people who have given me advice I didn't expect to hear." Sophia found herself momentarily distracted by the way the morning light caught the silver threads in his dark hair, by the small scar near his left temple that softened his otherwise perfect features. She forced herself to focus on his words. "What kind of unexpected advice?" she managed. Vincent smiled, not his usual corporate smile, but something more genuine. "Yesterday, you suggested that our messaging was emotionally disconnected. Every other consultant has told me our brand is too emotional, too personal for a company our size. They want us to be more corporate, more distant. That would be a mistake," Sophia said before she could stop herself. "Why?" "Because..." Sophia hesitated, then decided that if she was going to maintain this lie, she might as well commit to her instincts. "Because distance is what people expect from large corporations. It's what they assume you'll give them. When you surprise them with genuine warmth, with acknowledgement of their hopes and concerns, you create loyalty that goes beyond any rational calculation." Vincent was quiet for a long moment, and Sophia worried she had overstepped. But when he spoke, his voice carried something that might have been wonder. "Do you know what our customer retention rate is?" Sophia shook her head. 68%. Industry average is 82%. We're losing customers because they don't feel connected to us, even though our products are superior to most of our competitors. What do your exit interviews tell you? That customers feel like we don't understand them, that we're too focused on efficiency and not enough on relationship. Vincent ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its perfect styling. "I've been so focused on building the best company that I forgot we need to be a company people actually want to work with." Sophia felt a pang of empathy for this powerful man who seemed genuinely troubled by his company's disconnect from its customers. "It's not too late to change that, isn't it? How do you rebuild emotional connection with hundreds of thousands of customers?" "One authentic interaction at a time," Sophia said softly. "You start by being honest about who you are and what you stand for, and then you consistently deliver on those values." They spent the next 2 hours developing a strategy that felt more like a philosophical conversation than a business meeting. Vincent shared his original vision for the company, creating technology that genuinely improved people's lives, while Sophia helped him identify ways to reconnect with that founding purpose. As their meeting concluded, Emma knocked and entered. With Vincent's lunch. "Miss Martinez, will you be joining Mr. Blackwood?" Emma asked politely, though Sophia caught the subtle way the assistant's eyes assessed her. "Actually," Vincent said, "I was hoping Sophia might have time for lunch." "There are a few more ideas I'd like to explore." Sophia glanced at her watch. She had no other appointments, no pressing deadlines, and despite the growing weight of her deception, she found herself genuinely enjoying these conversations with Vincent. "I'd like that," she said. As Emma left. To make arrangements, Sophia realized that for the first time in months, she felt intellectually challenged and genuinely appreciated for her ideas. Vincent Blackwood might be intimidating and impossibly wealthy, but he was also thoughtful, passionate about his work, and surprisingly easy to talk to. She had no way of knowing that Emma was already making discreet inquiries about Morrison and Associates' newest consultant, or that the web of lies surrounding her identity was about to become much more complicated. The revelation and scandal Marcus Sterling had built his reputation on knowing everyone's secrets before they knew them themselves. As the founder of Sterling Media Group and Vincent Blackwood's primary competitor in the tech space, he had made it his business to stay informed about every move Blackwood Industries made. When whispers began circulating about Vincent's new mystery consultant, Marcus's interest was immediately piqued. "Tell me about this woman," Marcus said to his head of intelligence, a sharp-faced man named Davidson, who had a talent for uncovering information people preferred to keep buried. "Sophia Martinez, supposedly from Morrison and Associates," Davidson replied, sliding a thin folder across Marcus's glass desk. "But here's where it gets interesting. Morrison and Associates has no record of any consultant by that name." Marcus's eyebrows rose as he opened the folder. Inside was a collection of photographs taken with a telephoto lens. Sophia entering the Meridian Tower, having coffee with Vincent, leaving his office building. In each image, she looked professional, but not expensively dressed, confident but not polished in the way of someone accustomed to high-level corporate environments. "Background check?" Marcus asked. "Freelance graphic designer from Queens. Lives in a studio apartment, drives a 10-year-old Honda, works mostly with small local businesses. No formal business training beyond community college courses." Marcus leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. This was better than he had hoped. Vincent Blackwood, the man who prided himself on due diligence and careful vetting, had been completely fooled by a nobody with no credentials and no business being within 100 miles of a boardroom. "How long has this been going on?" 3 weeks. They've been meeting almost daily. My sources inside Blackwood Industries say she has unprecedented access. He's even been taking her to lunch regularly." Marcus studied the photographs more carefully. There was something in the body language between Vincent and Sophia that suggested their relationship had evolved beyond purely professional. Vincent's usually rigid posture appeared more relaxed, and there was an attentiveness in the way he looked at her that Marcus had never seen before. "Interesting," Marcus murmured. "Vincent Blackwood has always been immune to personal attachments. If this woman has gotten under his skin..." 3 days later, Marcus put his plan into motion. The story broke simultaneously across multiple media outlets. Billionaire CEO duped by fake consultant, the great corporate deception, how a struggling artist infiltrated Blackwood Industries, Vincent Blackwood's mystery woman, fraud or gold digger. By noon, Sophia's photograph was plastered across financial news websites alongside details about her real background, her modest apartment, and her actual credentials. The narrative that emerged painted her as either a calculating con artist or a delusional woman who had somehow manipulated one of the country's most successful businessmen. Emma Chen was the first to inform Vincent of the breaking story. She entered his office with unusual hesitation, her typically composed demeanor showing cracks of genuine concern. "Sir, there's something you need to see," she said, setting her tablet on his desk with the news article already loaded. Vincent read in silence, his expression growing colder with each paragraph. When he finished, he set the tablet down with deliberate precision and looked up at Emma. "Is Miss Martinez scheduled to arrive today?" "In 20 minutes, sir." "When she arrives, show her in immediately, and Emma, clear my schedule for the rest of the day." Emma nodded and left, closing the door behind her with unusual care. She had seen Vincent angry before, but this was different. There was a controlled fury in his stillness that was somehow more intimidating than any outburst. Sophia arrived at the Meridian Tower to find a cluster of photographers and reporters gathered near the entrance. Confused and increasingly panicked, she managed to slip through a side entrance and take the service elevator to avoid the main lobby. Her hands were shaking as she pressed the button for the 32nd floor, though she couldn't understand why media would be gathered at Vincent's building. Emma, S face, was carefully neutral as she greeted Sophia. But there was something in her eyes that made Sophia's stomach clench with dread. "He's waiting for you," Emma said simply. Vincent was standing with his back to the door when Sophia entered, looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the city below. He didn't turn around when she closed the door behind her. 3 weeks, he said, his voice deadly quiet. 3 weeks I've been sharing confidential business information with someone who lied to me from the moment we met." Sophia's legs suddenly felt unsteady. "Vincent, I can explain. Can you?" He turned around, and the coldness in his grey eyes made her step back involuntarily. "Can you explain how Sophia Martinez, freelance graphic designer with a community college education, ended up in my boardroom pretending to be a high-level business consultant?" The article was spread across his desk, her photo prominently displayed, alongside headlines that made her stomach turn. She could see quotes from anonymous sources describing her as everything from a calculated infiltrator to a pathetic social climber. "It was an accident," Sophia said desperately. "I got on the wrong elevator. Your people mistook me for someone else. And before you could correct them, you decided to lie. For 3 weeks. While I shared proprietary information with you, while I restructured company strategy based on your recommendations, while I—" Vincent stopped abruptly, his jaw clenching. "While you what?" Sophia whispered. Vincent looked away, unwilling to finish the sentence. "While I started to care about you, while I began to imagine what it might be like to trust someone completely, while I allowed myself to hope that I had finally met someone who saw me as more than a bank account and a business opportunity." "It doesn't matter," he said instead. "What matters is that you made me look like a fool. Do you have any idea what this does to my reputation, to my company's credibility?" Tears were streaming down Sophia's face, but she made no move to wipe them away. "I never meant for this to happen. I tried to tell you the truth so many times, but it was more convenient to keep lying." Vincent's voice was like ice. "More convenient to play dress-up and pretend to be someone important. That's not why I did it," Sophia's voice cracked. "I stayed because for the first time in my life, someone listened to my ideas. Someone treated me like I was smart and capable and worth paying attention to. I know it was wrong, but I wasn't trying to hurt you or steal from you or get out." The words hung in the air between them like a physical blow. "Vincent, please, get out of my building, Miss Martinez, and don't come back." Sophia stood frozen for a moment, looking at the man who had become the most important part of her days for the past 3 weeks. The man who had listened to her ideas, challenged her thinking, and made her feel like she could be more than she had ever imagined. Without another word, she turned and walked out of his office, past Emma's carefully averted gaze, into the elevator that would carry her away from the best 3 weeks of her life. As the elevator descended, she closed her eyes and tried to ignore the sound of her heart breaking. The unexpected proposal. Grace Martinez had lived through the Great Depression, 2 wars, and the death of her husband of 53 years. At 82, she possessed the kind of wisdom that came from surviving life's hardest lessons and the practical sense to know when her granddaughter was wallowing in self-pity. "Mija," she said, settling into the worn armchair in Sophia's cramped studio apartment. "You've been hiding in this place for 2 weeks. It's time to face the world." Sophia looked up from her laptop, where she'd been half-heartedly working on a logo design for a pet grooming service, the only client who hadn't cancelled their contract after the media frenzy surrounding her deception at Blackwood Industries. "Abuela, I can't. Every time I go outside, someone recognizes me from those awful articles. Yesterday, a woman at the grocery store called me a gold-digging fraud." Grace studied her granddaughter's appearance. Unwashed hair, the same clothes she'd worn for 3 days, dark circles under her eyes that spoke of too little sleep and too much regret. "And what did you tell her?" Grace asked. "Nothing. I just left my groceries and came home." Grace made a disapproving sound. "Your grandfather didn't raise me to run from fights, and I didn't raise your mother to back down from bullies. We don't run, Sophia. We face our problems with dignity. This is different, Abuela. I lied to Vincent. I lied to everyone. I deserve what's happening to me." "Do you?" Grace's voice sharpened. "Did you steal money from this man? Did you try to hurt his business? Did you seduce him for personal gain?" "No, but nothing. You made a mistake, a big one, yes, but the punishment doesn't fit the crime." Grace leaned forward, her weathered hands clasping Sophia's. "Tell me about him, this Vincent Blackwood." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, something that had been happening regularly since that devastating final confrontation. He was brilliant, Abuela, and kind when he thought no one was looking. He cared about his employees, about making products that actually helped people. He listened to my ideas like they mattered. And you fell in love with him. It wasn't a question, and Sophia didn't bother denying it. "Yes, but he hates me now. He thinks I was trying to use him." Grace was quiet for a long moment, studying her granddaughter's face. "What if he doesn't? What do you mean? What if this Vincent Blackwood is as miserable as you are right now? What if he's sitting in his fancy office, wondering if the woman he cared about was real or if it was all an act?" Sophia shook her head. "You didn't see his face when he found out, Abuela. He was furious, betrayed. He told me never to come back." "Men say stupid things when they're hurt," Grace said, matter-of-factly. "Your grandfather once told me he never wanted to see me again because I danced with another man at our neighbor's wedding. 3 days later, he was standing outside my parents' house with flowers, begging me to marry him." "That's not the same thing." A sharp knock at the door interrupted Sophia's protest. She and Grace looked at each other in surprise. Sophia hadn't had any visitors since the story broke, and her few friends had been maintaining a careful distance to avoid being dragged into the media circus. "I'll get it," Grace said, rising with the fluid grace of someone who refused to acknowledge her advanced age. Sophia heard the door open, followed by her grandmother's surprised voice. "Well, you're certainly tall enough to be the one who's got my granddaughter tied up in knots." Sophia's heart stopped. She scrambled to her feet, smoothing her wrinkled shirt and running her hands through her unwashed hair as Vincent Blackwood stepped into her small apartment, looking almost surreal against the backdrop of her thrift store furniture and discount decor. He was impeccably dressed, as always, but there was something different about him, a tension in his posture, a tiredness around his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well either. "Miss Martinez," he said formally, then nodded to Grace. "Ma'am." "Abuela, this is Vincent Blackwood," Sophia managed. "Vincent, this is my grandmother, Grace Martinez." Grace looked between them with the shrewd assessment of someone who had been reading people for 8 decades. "I'll make coffee," she announced, disappearing into the small kitchen alcove and leaving them alone. An awkward silence stretched between them. Vincent looked around the apartment, taking in the easel in one corner with a half-finished painting, the small desk covered with design, sketches, the bookshelf crammed with volumes on art, business, and psychology. "This is where you live," he said, and there was something in his voice that wasn't quite surprise, but wasn't quite what Sophia had expected either. "Yes." Sophia wrapped her arms around herself defensively. "I know it's not much compared to what you're used to." "It's honest," Vincent interrupted. "Everything here is honest." They looked at each other across the small space, and Sophia felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "Why are you here?" she asked quietly. Vincent was silent for a long moment, studying her face as if memorizing it. "Because I've spent 2 weeks trying to forget you, and I can't." Sophia's breath caught. "Vincent, I was angry," he continued, "furious, not just because you lied, but because I had started to believe that someone could care about me for who I am rather than what I have. When I found out the truth, it felt like confirmation of everything I've always believed about people's motivations. I understand why you—" "I'm not finished." Vincent stepped closer, and Sophia caught the familiar scent of his cologne. "I spent 2 weeks analyzing every conversation we had, looking for signs of deception, trying to figure out your angle. And do you know what I found?" Sophia shook her head, afraid to speak. "Nothing. No attempts to leverage our relationship for financial gain. No requests for favors or introductions. No fishing for personal information you could sell to competitors. You gave me business advice, good advice, and you never asked for anything in return except the chance to keep talking." "Because I wasn't trying to con you," Sophia whispered. "I was just trying not to disappoint you." "I know." Vincent's voice was soft now, almost vulnerable. "I also know that Marcus Sterling orchestrated that media circus. He's been trying to damage my reputation for years, and he used you to do it." Sophia's eyes widened. She had wondered how the media had gotten such detailed information about her background so quickly. "The question is," Vincent continued, "what do we do about it?" "We?" Sophia's voice was barely audible. Vincent reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia's eyes went wide with shock. "I have a proposition for you," he said, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. "Marry me." "What?" Sophia stumbled backward, her mind reeling. "Vincent, you can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Marcus wanted to create a scandal about my judgment, about my ability to be deceived by a woman with questionable motives. But what if the story becomes something else entirely?" Vincent set the ring box on a small coffee table and began pacing in the limited space of her apartment. What if Vincent Blackwood didn't get fooled by a con artist? What if he fell in love with a brilliant woman who happened to be in the wrong place at the right time? What if this whole thing was an unconventional love story rather than a corporate scandal? Sophia stared at him in disbelief. "You want to marry me to save face?" "No." Vincent stopped pacing and looked directly into her eyes. "I want to marry you because the past 3 weeks were the best 3 weeks I've had in years. I want to marry you because you challenge me, because you make me laugh, because you see possibilities I never would have considered. I want to marry you because when I imagine my future, you're in it. But Vincent, I love you," he said simply. "I know it's complicated. I know the circumstances are far from ideal, but I love you. The question is whether you feel the same way." From the kitchen came the sound of Grace clearing her throat meaningfully. "Coffee's ready," she called out. "And Mija, If you let a good man walk away because you're too scared to take a chance, I will never forgive you." Sophia looked at the ring, sparkling in the afternoon sunlight streaming through her small window. Then she looked at Vincent. This impossible, intimidating, wonderful man who had somehow found his way from the 32nd floor of a corporate tower to her humble studio apartment. "I love you too," she whispered. "But marriage, after everything that's happened?" "Especially after everything that's happened," Vincent said, moving closer to her. "I don't want a conventional relationship, Sophia. I don't want safe or predictable or politically correct. I want real, I want honest, I want you." Sophia felt tears spilling down her cheeks as she looked at this man who had somehow managed to surprise her one more time. "Are you sure about this, about me?" Vincent cupped her, face gently in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Grace emerged from the kitchen with 3 cups of coffee and a satisfied smile. "Now this," she said approvingly, "is how a real love story begins." 6. Months later, their wedding made the front page of every business publication in the country, not as a scandal, but as one of the most romantic stories of the year. The headline in the Financial Times read, "The elevator mix-up that led to the wedding of the year." And in the end, Sophia Martinez, now Sophia Blackwood, realized that sometimes the wrong elevator takes you exactly where you need to go.